Welcome to the Space Biology and Health Symposium 2021. I am Jannene Kyytsonen, and this is my presentation, Building a Digital Platform Economy, Community by Community. A symposium about space biology and health does not immediately conjure up a connection to community-based digital platform economy. But if you bear with me, I hope to show that management of the health relationship of people and their communities can be greatly helped by analysing data generated on digital platforms which monitor people's day-to-day economic activity. In saying that, I am mindful of situations like Facebook becoming Meta because of trust issues, and I will discuss that aspect later. Underlying my proposal are two premises. One, that space health management can be correlated to rural communities' health management, and two, that digital platforms for economic activity are best suited to capture the data needed. For premise one, I believe humanity will explore space in the future because I believe curiosity is an essential feature of human nature and evidenced by our historic expeditions across and under seas to mountaintops, polar caps, deserts and jungles. By going to space, we are fulfilling our need to explore the unknown, but where the danger of entering an extreme environment was never so high. The initial exploration will be done by robotics and machines because the work is difficult and the environment extreme. So now, how do I explain the correlation between space community lifestyles and those of rural communities? I will name 5 similarities that immediately come to mind. One, there's an increasing number of use of robotics and machinery in rural communities as the average age of agricultural workers climbs. Indeed, in Western economies, there are often not enough hands available to do the jobs. 2, the aging agricultural workers suffer similar medical problems as astronauts, with conditions affecting bone density, hypertension, normal pressure hydrocephalus, macular degeneration, glaucoma, clouding of the cornea, and so on. 3, a lack of infrastructure because of the distance from population centres. 4, a need to be self-reliant and resilient to crises. And 5, lifestyles and existence that rely on scrupulous management of scarce resources. For premise 2, it is now possible for a community to manage its own local economy using blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and by that navigate the sustainable utilisation of its own local resources. Here I will note that the Commonwealth Bank of Australia currently trades 12 cryptocurrencies, and this will empower communities to trade with other entities, creating databases of local, regional, state, national and international uses, locations and movements of resources. The use of high-speed communications and renewable power means a community can operate its own virtual power station, managing a local microgrid, and the flow of power feed into and drawing from homes, vehicles, devices, personal and community storage, and the main grid. Currently, all electrical vehicles except Tesla accommodate the two-way flow of power, essentially creating a spare battery for the home. The Internet of Things will see digital platforms connecting all devices for their smart management in making our lives easier and minimizing the power needed to do so. The interoperability of technology can be designed and managed on a personal and community level using compatible digital platforms. It will be up to each community's local governance to build the digital ecosystem it prefers. Once a community-based digital economy is established, where protected personal and aggregated anonymized data can be collected and analyzed, the community can now look at how it manages its health and environment. I would prefer to quantify health changes and outcomes derived from economic data rather than qualitative data because I am asserting that actions speak louder than words. Many tell the doctor that they are maintaining a healthy diet, but the purchase of at the local market of foodstuffs high in sugar and salt might raise doubts about the prospective truth of that. Similarly, the use of devices like fitness trackers and smartwatches can indicate daily physical exertions and be the source of valuable data, especially if in collaboration with health insurance companies who are financially motivated to support preventative practices and behaviours. After establishing baselines, the impact of using robotics, drones, e-shepherd, ground sensors and other labour-saving devices and technologies, and hopefully stress-reducing technologies, can be measured against health outcomes. There is also the use of diagnostic aids like MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds, and so on, which can be sent to general practices or specialist medical practitioners to inform a virtual consultation, just as done in space and increasingly used here during the pandemic. So, the logic is to analyse the lifestyle data of ageing rural communities whose members battle similar medical problems to astronauts, who need to be mindful of finite scarce resources for essential needs, and who utilise robotics and other technologies to optimise productivity and survival. And here I note a problem in collecting data. Health professionals have long battled the dilemma of protecting privacy versus medical research needs. So I'm suggesting new encrypted economic platforms can protect privacy whilst gathering data for the public good, and that this anonymised data can be utilised to manage health outcomes, just as space agencies gather data to better manage the health of their astronauts. I have said the data should be collected community by community, but I am not talking about scale. I'm talking about diversity and the need to study communities as individual entities. I suggest this because demographics, including gender ratios, various climatic environments, geographies, national languages and cultures, and many other variables will have an impact on the data produced. So I believe I should now turn to describing what I mean by a community and talk about what I see as its structure and purpose. I contend that humans, to thrive and survive, have chosen to live in communities which develop a culture and institutions to allocate scarce resources. I further contend that the political and economic institutions we have given agency to have long grappled with the dilemma of the common good versus individualism. The recent debate over mask wearing and vaccination provide an example of how emotion and politics plays a vital role in decision making and behaviours. It is our social dynamics which will affect the political regimes evolving, ranging from authoritarian ones, where a few individuals dominate, to democracies, where the wishes of the majority decide. A community's social and political attitude, then, will be instrumental to their decision-making processes. Sadly, these decision-making processes may or may not consider scientific expertise and advice, and are therefore subject to suboptimal outcomes at times. In 2018, Alex Pentland published Social Physics: How Good Ideas Spread, The Lessons from New Science. He had studied the impact of virtual versus impersonal connections and how that affected the sharing and assimilation of knowledge. This would suggest that in-person connection and communications would best serve a local community in managing its affairs, because the study found that ideas and actions were more strongly embedded through personal contact and trust. I believe the input from external experts may also need to be delivered in person from time to time to achieve greater adoption of evidence-based policy. I would also observe that regardless of regimes, evolution of societies has currently culminated in economic globalization, where communities are increasingly concentrated in cities. This arrangement allows for more efficient economic management of human demand and supply activity, but it creates a disconnect between urban and rural living. Ecological cost is still not efficiently nor sufficiently priced, and this impacts rural communities and fair payments for their inputs. It currently results in economic activity distortion of fair resource allocation, where individuals are benefiting rather than allocation for the common good. To be better balanced, the economy will need to factor in the increasing number of extreme climate events and their impact on systems going forward. The payment system needs to be better reflective of the growing threat of food security, biodiversity, soil fertility, and the health and resilience of communities, whether in rural or urban settings. To this end, the difference from one culture to another and from one country to another needs to be better understood. The Smart Cities program has evolved, and the recognition that local governance is best placed to optimally structure and manage local ecosystems for the benefit of the whole environment has focused on large populations, where it is assumed that digital transformation is more easily achieved. As we prepare to colonise space, however, we will need to establish a better understanding of how healthy remote communities can survive and thrive. I have depicted two modern approaches to how sustainable practices might be achieved by a community, a British and a Nordic one. But I am in no way saying these are the only two ways, nor limiting the number of ways great outcomes can be achieved. The British model suggests using targets and restrictions, assuming externalities can be costed. It runs the risk where some might only do what is minimally required, or of unintended consequences where people might end up being target-focused rather than outcome-focused. The other promotes self-regulation and initiative. It assumes an altruistic culture will prevail, but it runs the risk of failure if insufficient education and direction is given. Both have positive and negative features and possibilities, and would depend on the community they are being applied to, as would any system chosen. I am planning to use a combination of the two in a community on New South Wales North Coast, depending on the ongoing impacts of COVID here in Australia. I support a model where members of a community share sustainability values which make them mindful of their actions for the benefit of the whole community. I believe this can be best achieved by introducing technology to make their life simpler and by working to create a closed local digital economy, but with platforms that connect it to others. The success or failure of the project will depend on how trust in each other and the technology and the experts evolves. I believe that future communities will have three common areas where trust needs to be established and built upon. 1. Trust in the machines, robotics and processes they use. 2. Trust in the people collecting the data from various platforms. And 3. Trust that advice delivered involving data analysis has their best interests at heart and can be acted upon with confidence. Trust is not usually given but earned, and it's gained over time with experience. So, let's consider a roadmap of how to create a local digital platform economy. Let's imagine a future space community. It will use AI management of drones and robots to help astronauts in their tasks. And there will be a team of experts collecting data from digital platforms, remotely observing and advising. Now, let's imagine a future rural community. It can also have digital platforms and AI management of drones and robots to help rural workers in their tasks, with teams of experts remotely observing and advising. To understand how well the community members are participating in that local ecosystem, the communities will need to audit and review how their members connect and communicate amongst themselves and with others. This is especially important considering you can't fix a problem if you don't know about it. So one of the top priorities will be establishing platforms for communication and maintenance of dialogues and healthy human relationships, which would include reviews of social inclusion and equity efforts. We can see on the slide some aspects that a self-reliant and resilient community might include. Health and technology experts could meet the community and stakeholders and undergo a consultation process to determine which technologies and processes would deliver optimum health outcomes and sustainability whilst managing a local economy. The community should audit its knowledge and asset base and then decide how it prioritises improvements needed. The two most crucial elements will be communications and power, preferably renewable power and storage, although technologies like nuclear are likely to be deployed in space and might be part of the mix, although possibly not here in Australia for some time, if ever. If we deploy a virtual power plant, a high-functioning communication system, preferably both satellite and land-based, should be established. The next levels of priority, especially given increasing numbers of extreme climate events, might be essential services, machine and infrastructure maintenance, and mobility systems. For these aspects, the use of drones, electric vehicles, 3D printers to produce replacement parts, and ongoing education to accommodate change should be planned. These devices should act as batteries and be capable of drawing charge when needed and then be able to feed power back when needed. One could well imagine the elimination of physical fencing and their replacement with sensors in the ground, where GPS tracking and stimulant producing collars around the necks of stock ensure that they stay in the desired areas. 24-hour-a-day CCTV and drones could conduct surveillance to check for unwanted land invasion and initiate appropriate reactions. The surveillance can be done remotely with robots or autonomous vehicles being dispatched and the rural worker used only as a last resort. This method of control has the advantage that the animals are not trapped by fencing when fleeing fires or floods and might be herded to safety by drones, robots or autonomous vehicles, making appropriate manoeuvres. When we consider the destructive force of nature, the construction of some so-called permanent infrastructures like fences seem an incredible waste of resources, given digital alternatives are possible. For resilience and self-reliance, the community could incorporate flexibility and adaptability in their provision of emergency services. They should consider mobile solar power pods like those made by Machinex, which can be moved to locations where equipment is damaged. They could send autonomous vehicles or drones with supplies as needed. They can invest in a series of community-owned satellite dishes connected to satellite constellations and a community radio communication system as backup. Satellite and aerial imagery could complement soil and water testing to ensure optimum cultivation and healthy production. The farm worker's health can be managed by health diagnostics. Daily routines can be continually monitored for change and whether these had positive or negative health impacts. Iterative design and adaptation should become part of rural lifestyle. The introduction of smart passive housing should also be considered, including possibilities for recreation and entertainment facilities. Indeed, how the rural workers relax might be an insight into their mental state and health. Hopefully, I've shown that embracing a digital economy and use of digital devices and platforms is how we can manage sustainable lifestyles both here and in space. Community health and well-being can be optimally managed if governance systems are by the people and for the people. By observing our rural communities, we can anticipate what will be needed in skills and equipment for a self-sustaining space community. We can study what cultural developments resulted and whether decision-making is evidenced by diversity and inclusion of all, or domination by just a few, and how this affected individual and community health outcomes. The cost of exporting Earth's scarce resources off-planet will drive optimization of what is sent. By watching rural communities, a better understanding of what to send to ensure maintenance and innovation and minimize redundancies should be gained. Understanding is often gained from analysis of big data, and in this regard, rural communities can show us how our innovations helped or hindered by collaboration or solitary contemplation, how much innovation is iterative and how much is revolutionary, and what impacts do resources available play. What kind of evolution does community engagement undergo, and what approaches and practices result in better or less efficient outcomes? For this big data processing, we need a digital platform economy and high level of technology use. And so in conclusion, I assert that space biology and health can be researched in a digital platform economy, community by community.